This is how you force your opponents into making mistakes on Football Manager. You want to use pressing traps or pressing triggers to actually do this. In this video, we'll look at how you can use pressing traps in defense to force your opponents into less dangerous positions, and also how you can use the pressing traps in attack to force opponents into making mistakes. This can help you win the ball back early in the opposition's territory and try to score a goal as quickly as possible. Now, there are 3 ways you can do this on Football Manager, and I'm going to walk you through all of them. You can use team instructions, internal player instructions, and opposition instructions to actually force mistakes. But before you jump into applying any of these instructions, you have to look at the opposition that you're playing against, and it kind of changes every match game. If you're using a downloaded tactic, you have to be careful how you apply these instructions, as it may affect your tactical setup. So we have a game coming up now against Crystal Palace, and if you look at their setup, they kind of have a 4-2-3-1 all set up. You can see most of their top players. They have a winger here in Hughes, and they also have a center forward. His name is Sasa Huma. You can go ahead and click the players and then look at their attributes, see what they've got, see what you're actually working with and who you're going to play against. Look at their pace, see their weaknesses. Kieran Hughes is currently a left-sided player, or he has a weak left foot. That's something I actually noticed. He's playing on the left-hand side with a stronger right foot. Setting up with a 4-2-3-1 gives us an idea about how we can go about applying these pressing trigger instructions to help them, or to help my team force the opponent into making mistakes. So first, we'll start off with the team instructions, and you want to head into the out of possession screen in your tactics screen. And if you want to force the opponent to play the ball to a player that is in the center, you can ask your team to force the opposition inside. Now, this works if you have a powerful defensive midfielder or 2 defensive midfielders who can hassle the opponent and win the ball back. It also works if you notice the opponent has good wingers who can cross the ball with their favorite foot from wide areas. However, if your opponent has a creative number 10 or an attacking midfielder in the center, you can block the passes to them by asking your team to show the opponents to the outside and force them towards the sidelines. This also works if the opponent has very good inside forwards who tend to cut inside and play passes from central positions. Now, this is a defensive team instruction and will require your players to work together to execute them. In attack is where it really gets interesting. This is where you can use player instructions or opposition instructions to force opponents into making mistakes. But how do you know which player to press that will actually force a mistake? To figure this out, you need to take a look at the opposition's defenders. Starting with the central defender, you can search for the opponent's defender that has low values for mental attributes like concentration, bravery, and composure. These players are vulnerable to making a mistake during a game. But hold on, they're not the players that you want to target here. It's quite the opposite. What I recommend is encouraging the opponents to play the ball to this player, as he is the least comfortable in possession. Then you can go ahead and trigger press this player and force them to make a mistake. To do this, check the opponent's defender that has higher values for mental attributes like concentration and composure, then ask your attacker to actually man mark him. This way, the opponent will likely play the ball to the less comfortable central defender as he is on mark. You can then apply a trigger press to this player and force the mistake. The same strategy applies for fullbacks. I like to ask both my wingers to mark the opponent's fullback, forcing them to play through the middle using their central defenders or their defensive midfielders. Speaking of defensive midfielders, they are a vital chain in the opponent's build-up play. If the player is comfortable on the ball, you want to man mark him and reduce the number of passes played to him during a match. You can go into the individual player instructions and ask your player to mark their opposite number. That is, the right winger on one side is going to be responsible for marking the opponent's left fullback, or you can do it vice versa. So what about the opposition instruction screen? This is where you can take the trigger press to the next level. There are 4 main instructions you can set in this screen. We have type marking, trigger press, tackling intensity, and show onto foot. Everything you need to know about the opponent's setup is on this screen, and you can see their player attributes and decide who you want to mark. When you find a player that is vulnerable, you can assign a trigger press on them. To know which players actually apply opposition instructions for, I like to use the Data Hub opposition scout report to actually do this, but in case you don't have access to that, you can just use the screen over here. Look for those players that have good attributes for crossing, passing, vision. You can see the fullback here in Anton Dyer. He currently has crossing 12, somewhat good vision, so he's the kind of player that I would want to type mark as a fullback, so I've already got that on him. You can go over to the left back as well and see what he's got. The left back also has good crossing, vision not so much, but he's another player that in case I wanted to type mark somebody, I will go ahead and type mark him, because he has the ability to actually create chances for the team. I also look at the defensive midfielder and the central midfielder. The defensive midfielder here is Luka Vuskovic for Chelsea, and his passing is quite average, vision quite average as well. So I have the idea that he's more of a defensive midfielder, not really a playmaker in the deeper position. I can then look at this other central midfielder and see passing 15, vision 16 for Mark Sheba. He's one of the more creative players. That he's one of the players that I will look ahead and try to type mark. For the trigger press, like I mentioned, I like to look for players that have low concentration. I have here in Hamsik, he has good bravery and good concentration, so composure not so much, so I might have to reconsider putting a trigger press on him. I may just leave the back four as it is and not try to trigger press anybody there. Looking at the defensive midfielder, he has somewhat good composure and good concentration, so there's no need to actually force a mistake from any of them. I can look at all the other players as well and see who they've got. I don't really see anybody that has low attributes for concentration and bravery or composure. You can also go ahead and try to trigger press players like wingers. We can have here Paul Conda. He has very good acceleration and very good pace. Somebody that has very good crossing. You can try to trigger press him and stop him from actually crossing the ball if possible, but we have to still watch the match and see what happens when you do that. For tackling, I like to look for players that have low bravery. Let's look at Shiba now, for example. His bravery is quite good. He's actually an excellent player. But look at the defensive midfielder in Vuskovic, also very good. The only player that I see here that doesn't have that much bravery is Anton Dyer, and you can see that his bravery is only 9. We can go ahead and put a hard tackling on him. Keep in mind that the hard tackling is only going to force the player to have a difficult game because you're trying to hassle him off the ball very often. This can offer us an opportunity to actually press Dyer and win possession back. When it comes to showing players onto their weaker foot, it's very similar to showing players inside and showing players outside. So if you have a winger here that is playing on the right hand side and he's a right-footed player, what you could do is to actually go into his show onto weaker foot and then ask him to either show onto weaker foot, or if you know what his weak foot is, you can ask the team to show him to his left foot. That way you're stopping him from using his favorite right foot and then forcing him to use the left foot, which is not very comfortable using. Indirectly, you're also showing the player inside.